You're a political talk show host in Phoenix, Arizona. You're always wondering what's going on in politics. Is it possible to create dialogue across the poles of politics in the United States? And you go to a special room to do your best thinking. You're doing it all analog, writing things out. And in the corner of that room, you have an autographed, signed album by your favorite hip hop artist. Which artist is it? What does it represent? You're going to have to listen to find out. This is one of my favorite conversations I've ever had. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome. This is Home Life for Extraordinary Impact. I'm Matt Barrios. I'm a dad, a researcher, a writer, and I am hosting this in order to help you design a home life that you really love. What am I researching? I'm doing some raw research that you're going to listen in on right now. This is unedited. We're just chatting away. And I am researching what it looks like for you to design a life at home for growth, connection, and making your greatest impact. That's what this show is all about, and I want to help you do that. In order to do that, I get to interview people from all around the world, experts and everyday folks, and we just talk about their home lives. What are the things that they've learned along the way? What is the shape of their home life? And also maybe some of the unique hacks or things that they do that help them. Today, we get to talk with Rob Hunter. I'm so excited to have you on this show, Rob. Thank you so much for being a part of it. And, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. First and foremost for, number one, designing a home life. It's just not something you really think about. It's like home is home, but if you want to be creative and you want to you do work from home, this is fantastic. So thank you. So a little bit about me. I have been a radio broadcaster for the last 26 years. I currently have a political talk show based in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm a communication coach and consultant on top of that. And I consult in other business too as we try to help that grow. So, it's a little busy over here, which is why I need a good home life.
Hey, you're in the right spot, Rob. That's all we're going to be talking about. And
perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So what I would love to hear a little bit about, so you're living in Phoenix, you're doing this consulting work, you're a radio broadcaster. It sounds like such a fascinating life. And I feel like often we don't get to, see behind the doors of people's, the facade of people's homes, right? What's it like at home? What are they up to when they walk in the door? What does it feel like and all that? And we'll get to that in just a moment. But first of all, I want to know more about some of the places that you have considered home over the years. Where have you lived? Where do you live now? What are the places you've considered home?
So Arizona is my sixth state that my now wife and I have lived in. So the first place I considered home was in Massachusetts. I grew up in a small Boston suburban town, about 8,500 people. That was home for like my first 21 years of life. And then from there, home was kind of a rotating 2-year, term. So Florida for 2 years, which I never really considered home. I never really felt that way when I was living in Florida. Then I moved to New Orleans, felt completely at home for 2 years. And that was like the 2 years leading up to Hurricane Katrina. So I left New Orleans because of Hurricane Katrina. So it's like you're in this state of where is home? Home ended up being in New Mexico later, which I was in a rush to get out of, which led me down to Phoenix. And we had a short stint in Georgia, in Atlanta in between. But that was not a home life, Matt, because that was in one of those extended stay hotels that we lived in for 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness.
So I appreciate the home that I have now in Phoenix because of all the jumping around we do, because this is a good, stable place for Mrs. Hunter and myself.
Okay, great. Awesome. You said that New Orleans, you felt completely at home. What was it about New Orleans that, really, connected with you?
Oh, man. It's the city, I think, Matt. It's just so welcoming. The people are phenomenal. Obviously, there's a good party life, too. So
Sure.
It's a good way to get acquainted with a city real quick. But it's just, New Orleans is just a unique place. So growing up in Boston, I've been to, at this point, 38 states. I've been to several major American cities. New Orleans is unique. So it was just so welcoming. Plus, I was 25 years old. prime party time. And I had
Yeah.
just landed my dream job. So like everything had lined up at that point. So it was just this whirlwind of awesome.
Totally, totally. I mean, you're in the right stage of life for that city, working your dream job. I mean, I get it. And now, in Phoenix, you and Mrs. Hunter, you're there, and it sounds like a very different, pace of life and change of speed. And you mentioned how it's a place where you feel like it's steady and a stable place, stable environment for your family. I would love to hear, when you go home, what does it look like, feel like? Let's say you're getting home from a day's work. What's happening?
Usually my wife will either be working. Her name is Amy. We don't have to call her Mrs. Hunter.
Okay.
So she'll be in the office. So I'll come in, and I come in through the garage, and then, we have my kitchen is right through the garage. And then there's my sitting room, which is like my favorite place in the house. It's my thinking spot, my creative spot. It's, I don't know, something about that spot. It's like in the corner, sit on the couch. So I go in and I put my bag down, say hi to Mrs. Hunter if she's ready to come out. Boom. You're going to find me in my spot come 7:30 at night when I get home.
That's great. I know like a lot of people have that spot in their house that feels like, man, this is my armchair, this is my couch, this is my corner, this is my hot tub, whatever it might be for people, but just like this sweet spot of life. When you're in that thinking spot, where does your mind go? What sort of thoughts are you having? How does that space affect you?
Oh, man, that's such a loaded question. I don't know. I've kind of embraced this. I'm working on a couple of projects. So that's where I go when I want to build some structure or, okay, how am I going to approach this? So you're, launching your podcast. I have an idea that I'm working on that's a podcast based. And that's where I go and I sit and I'm trying to, my note taking is what I'm trying to figure out that next step on, because I like to write it down like old school with like a Bic pen, one of those 99-cent box of 10 Bic pens. So that's what I'm doing. I'm sitting there. I've tried the iPad for digital, but there's just something magical about sitting in my little corner and just letting the mind go wherever it goes. Like in terms of this project that I'm working on, like, okay, what's the title of it going to be? What am I going to talk about? Who am I going to interview? So you come up with a structure. Or, doing a political talk show, I can sit in that spot and I can read my news and I can start developing my ideas that I'm going to use on my show that day. Because I think one of the things I think a lot about, Matt, is in this current political environment, how do we bring people together more so than continue to go on this separate path? Because the chasm between the two party system seems to be growing and growing and growing. So I spent a lot of my time, probably foolishly, like, okay, I think we could get along. I think we could do it. Even if we have different people we vote for, it's okay.
I just have to say, to show some of my bias, I'm so thankful for somebody who works in political talk show work, actually having a desire to see dialogue happen across things and find unity. And it can be so polarizing here in the USA. And, one thing, a under the surface mission of this podcast, as well as I'm interviewing people all around the world and hearing about their homes, is realizing, hey, we all go home somewhere. We all have a place we lay our head at the end of the day, and we're all trying to figure it out. And what if that's actually a place where, it is a home base for all of us to meet at? Exactly. So, that's just me, vibing with you a little bit here for a sec. But I want to dig deeper into one thing that you said, which is, you're doing a lot of like research and thinking and idea work. It sounds like you're taking your notes, you're reading your news sources, all of that. And what is it about your home? Like how do you use your home in order to help you be a real thought worker, an idea worker? What are the things that help you in that?
Number one, music. So we have a Sonos system.
Oh, yeah.
Which is always on in the house, unless we're watching TV, right? The music is always on. I'm a huge 90s hip hop fan. So for me, If I'm vibing, it's usually 90s hip hop. Now, sometimes I get a little bit slower to R&B, but it's that same kind of vibe. Like there's some newer artists that I'm just learning about through algorithms, throwing like an artist like Sir my way, which I highly recommend the song called The Evils. Oh, fantastic.
Okay.
But I just like to have a nice vibe because then I feel comfortable and I'm in that, because this is our first house, Matt, that we've ever owned. And I think that is a big deal too, because our house in Phoenix is kind of situated on a mountain preserve. So if you look in our backyard, you see a mountain, which the Phoenix mountain's like, I don't know, 600 feet in the air, but it looks cool. So
Sure.
The nature vibe is really cool. I have a house, if I'm looking at my backyard on my left, that I can't really see unless I'm looking directly at it. And I have one kind of off in the corner in the right, but it's kind of mostly covered up by these Palo Verde trees. So I feel like this is a great place of solitude, even though I'm literally almost in the middle of Phoenix, which is a city of 1.6 million people. So
Yeah.
I think all of those things kind of go into the vibe that I'm looking for, right? To create that space where I can just do and I can just be and I can just enjoy. Because it's weird. I'm such a nerd, Matt. One of the things I actually get the most fun out of is thinking of
Yes.
ideas on, okay, if I say it this way, is it bringing us together or is it dividing us? Is it exposing, I don't know, because I focus a lot on communication as a communications coach and how messages are delivered. So it just having the music, having my nature vibe, having my own spot, my own house, all ties into what I hope will be some useful creative efforts that can actually help heal divides. That's the goal. Well, as we wade into the waters, we'll see how it all works out.
Well, I think I mean, as I said, I'm just on the same page with you, and I love that goal. It's interesting to me how much music, the nature vibe, your thinking space, all of those coincide in order to put you in a particular state of mind, state of relaxation, able to ideate endlessly, all of that sort of stuff. And I think it's, I don't know, it's an exploration that I'm doing, which is like how much our homes, can we shift these dials on our homes that help us be the kind of people we want to be, and that's part of what I'm hearing in what you're saying. Like you can turn on some 90s hip hop, you can, look at this, 600-foot mountain in your backyard, and then you can just be like, okay, I get to be, like in my personal like sweet spot, right? My zone of genius. And it's partly because I'm intentional about what I do with my home, right?
100%.
Yeah. So I love hearing that. And it sounds like this is part of what's going really, really well in your home life. When it's working well, you're in your sweet spot. Tell me more about like the relationships of home, like who are you living with? What helps relationship bloom in your home as well?
That's fantastic. I was actually thinking about this ahead of talking to you, Matt, because, as a communications coach, I don't just work with executives, but couples, right? One of the major keys to a successful long-term relationship is how you communicate. So my wife and I, it's just us in the house. So we have, a conversation spot, really. Like, where are you going to go to talk about money and finances? Where are you going to go to talk about maybe if you have a fight or a disagreement? So if typically for us, it's in that same room. So we're fortunate. We have a 3-bedroom house. It's like 1,640 square feet, but we have 2 like sitting rooms. So the one that I sit in most of the time is like our smaller, we call our little family room. But then we have this bigger room with these huge windows that occasionally we sit in. So most of the conversations happen on our little blue couch in our little sitting room. And that's where it's free flowing, right? It's Amy can say something. Most of the time I accept what she says without getting all emotional about it. Occasionally it requires a little bit more work, but you got to work it out, right? So having a nice communication space where you can talk about the major issues as a couple, as a household, and, because my wife started her own company, so we have a lot of like business meetings and strategies that we talk about all in our same little spot. Because I think that for us, is like a huge key to home life to make sure everything is very cohesive. And my wife and I have been together for 23 years, so we kind of know how to communicate with each other at this point, but we've worked really hard at it. And that's something that's translated into this house as well.
That makes sense. And I mean, I completely hear and completely agree with the way that communication is the bedrock for a healthy relationship. And it sounds to me like you actually really intentionally use space in your home as a way to set a tone, right? So it's that blue couch. It's
Yes.
That's the space where you can have your back and forth, and you sometimes disagree, sometimes agrees. You're strategizing. You're figuring things out. That's incredible. I love hearing that. What are some of the things that throw home life sideways for you? Like
Oh, man.
the curveballs. Like what is it? Because it happens for all of us, right? So what does it look like for you?
Okay. Home repairs. As in, we bought a house that was built in 1960, which in Phoenix is really old. So it's like, oh, you got one of the oldest houses in town. So we had a major pipe replacement under the floor that we had to do like year 2 in the house because the pipes were 60 years old and were in danger of leaking, and nobody wants that. So
Sure.
then we found mold in our guest bathroom. So that's been this year-plus long project of putting all the pieces together. Now, my wife has designed the bathroom phenomenally well, but we also are waiting to get the tub installed. So the tub right now is kind of in the living room. So it's just hanging out. So the chaos of the constant, okay, we got to upgrade this because things are old and there was mold. That is one of the challenges that we face. I kind of just accept it as, okay, this is the house we bought. And then I look out at the 600-foot mountain and then I go, it's worth it. Even if the house is in a state of disrepair. Now, Mrs. Hunter, on the other hand, has a little bit more trouble relaxing when she can see the tub. So we're working on that, getting the tub installed and finding a nice balance. But those home repairs always throw interruptions our way.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm a renter in San Francisco, so like I don't deal with home repairs in the same sort of way as people who own a home, right? And it feels like it really, like the remodeling process, the fixing, the repairs, that can really, destabilize a person, right? Like,
Yes.
this place where you lay your head, it's in chaos, it's in disarray. It's hard for that to not affect your own headspace. And it sounds like your wife, Amy.
Now, for you, Matt,
happens.
So if you call for repair, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
That's
just
all right.
a question here. So is there a frustration for you? Like, okay, if let's say the toilet needs to be fixed and you call, if they take like a day or two to come in, can that be like, dude, you're interrupting my flow, my chi over here?
Oh, yeah.
Because I do think there's an advantage to apartment living, and that's it, right? You pick up the phone, you call, but sometimes if the repairs are delayed, you're like, okay. Because I had one guy, and this is a whole separate story, because when we first moved to Phoenix, we lived in an apartment, and the guy below us was actually growing weed. So we could smell it in our bathroom.
Oh, boy.
I thought I was just smoking it. I was like, whatever. But I was like, man, this is really potent. And it turns out I come home from work one day and there's like 12 cop cars. And I was like, what's going on? Oh, they arrested the guy who lives down below you.
Oh, my
He's
goodness.
growing marijuana. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
okay. And not that I have a problem with that, with THC, but it was just funny. It was before it was legalized in the state of Arizona. It was very potent. So those types of things could interrupt your flow in like apartment life. But, living in San Francisco in the city, what other options do you have? You got to go apartment.
Yeah, seriously. Unless you have an extra $2 million laying around to buy a house, right? Like that's the way it works in San Francisco. Yep. We're in a pretty plush rent control apartment deal here in San Francisco. We got the COVID discount. Rent dropped 30%. Nice. And so now we're set up in a beautiful 1-bedroom here. And when it comes to repairs and getting people to come help us out and fix stuff, like people, like we're really, blessed and grateful that we live in an apartment that's pretty well managed. Some of my co-tenants might disagree, but in our experience, it's been pretty good. We say, hey, this faucet's not working. Could you help us out? And within a day, somebody's there to help. Or,
perfect.
So like, I would say it's really not too bad. On the other hand, I can relate to the people producing drugs, neighbors producing drugs story. What happened that got us out of our last place? All right.
Oh.
Well, I wasn't planning on getting in this, but since we're exchanging stories, it's fun to do. So, me and my wife were living in San Francisco in an old apartment complex. It wasn't very well kept. and our building manager lived upstairs. One night, middle of the night, 3:30 in the morning, the alarm goes off, and it's like fire alarm. We're like, we got to get out of here. I peek out the door. There's actually smoke in the hallway. It was terrifying. And so we start going down the fire escape. We eventually go down a couple flights and then out through our neighbor's apartment and to the street. Come to find out that the origin of the fire was an electrical fire started by our building manager upstairs, where he was cooking meth. And so it was just like, what in the world? Like, we got to get out of here. We had just found out we were pregnant. We were just like, who knows what these chemicals are going to do to us? Like, we got to get out of here as quickly as possible. So, thank God we were able to get out real fast, and we found a place we're very, very happy in. And maybe that's part of why we're so grateful to be living here, and our co-tenants in this building maybe are a little less grateful. We just know what it's like to live in a building that's managed by a person cooking meth. And thankfully, that's not the situation here.
Maybe some of the things fell through the cracks, some of the repairs. Oh, sorry, I'm busy cooking meth up here.
Yeah, exactly, right? So, I mean, that just to say, who knows what kind of crazy neighbors you're going to have. How funny that we both have these, drug producer stories for neighbors. Okay, that's a big aside, but I had fun talking with you about that. I want to come back to another question, because one of the ways that I'm exploring home life with people is not only the physical space, but even how you use your time at home. So what are the daily rhythms, weekly rhythms, quarterly, yearly, whatever those look like, rhythms of life that help you have a great home life. What do those look like for you, Rob?
I think it's freedom based. So, I have a coach that I work with, and one of the things I talk to her about all the time is my time. Because, I have 58 projects going on. So I'm like, all right, how do I find time to do all these? So what I don't like is feeling overwhelmed by scheduling things. So my home life is more free flowing, where I know if I spend a weekend at home, which I really started enjoying during the pandemic, I'm like, oh, what do you mean? I don't have to go out every Friday and Saturday night. I can just stay home and I can enjoy this. Yeah. So I try to take a chunk of time on a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on how I'm feeling. Sometimes I just need a day, right? So Saturday sometimes becomes just chill day, rest day, hang out. And then Sunday will be a good portion of that, 4-6 hours will just be work, whether I'll write, which is I think is cool because Matt and I met in a writing class, which is super fascinating that here we are talking about this.
Yeah.
Because, that sometimes is a draw to me. Sometimes it's okay, let me work on my podcast media concept. So I'll do that. Or okay, let me work on the radio show. So typically weekends is reserved for a good chunk of time. And then 2 nights a week, I'll do a little bit of creative work when I get home from work. So I have this nice, because I don't know, I'm a night owl. I like being up late. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I'm just find myself up till 2 a.m, just thinking, working, taking notes, conceptualizing something. So to get back to that time, it's really that free flowing, but it's giving myself enough time at my home in order to do all those things. That also is a challenge because, you're trying to maintain friendships, relationships, which require you to leave your house. So it's the constant juggling of all these things, but it all comes down to, okay, if I'm motivated and willing and am loving my projects, I'll find time and space to work on them, whether it's at midnight, 10 o'clock in the morning, Sunday morning, Saturday afternoon. That's just one of the keys for me. It's not time blocking it. It's more let's just kind of see where this goes.
Yeah.
I guess my inner hippie's coming out, Matt.
I love it. That's such an interesting way to think about it because there are going to be different strokes for different folks. Different personalities going to be attracted to structure, others more to freedom. Others want to really time block things out. Others want the freedom that you're describing. And you sound like for yourself, you do your best work when it comes to conceptualizing things and all that by focusing less on okay, I need to do this every day, or I need to do this every week at this time, or something like that, and more on kind of getting below the surface of that to what motivates me, what keeps me in a good headspace, and And some of that has to do with like taking a little bit of time to rest and being home a little bit, but also getting out and spending time with your friends. And also not sweating it if you're going to stay up super late working on some stuff for a while, right? Like, and
Exactly.
and that sounds like a really good combination of self-awareness for the way that you want to use your space at home in order to bring your best self to your work, right? That's so cool.
And I think that what's so fascinating, Matt, about that is I gave myself the time to kind of learn more about myself. And that really, the pandemic actually helped me because I was, at home way more than I ever have been in my life.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, how do I take advantage of this in these less than ideal conditions?
Yeah.
So that was one of the things I worked on was a ton of self-awareness so that I know that, okay, I do like a certain element of freedom. Like I need a certain amount of, free flowing, like, okay, rather than it's Saturday at 2:00 to 6:00, I have to sit down and I have to do this project. I'm like, no,
Sure.
I have to do this at some point during the weekend rather than, all right, here's the time. Because then I'm like, okay, I can ease my way into it. I don't feel stressed. I don't feel rushed because I bet, like most of us, right? I don't know if you're the same way, Matt. You got the baby, you got the wife, you're all in your house. So you have some different challenges, which I want to ask you about your time, like raising a kid in the middle of home life. How does that impact you? And but I think that it's for each of us to find what works best for us, right? And I love that there's so much content for us to follow. We can go online and we can get tips. And I love what you're doing in collecting all these things because maybe what I say works for you, or maybe what your next guest says works better for you. But it's about trying those things out to see what feels right for you, feels natural. And I try to get into that state as much as I can is when I'm just feeling in that natural flow, it doesn't feel like work.
I love what you're saying about like just taking in different sources and letting it expand your imagination to like even just see, well, it's an option for me to structure my life, very loosely in the way that Rob does. Like he's not thinking I need to do this from X time to X time. I just need to get it done this weekend sometime, when the mood's right, basically. And I just feel like that's there's probably somebody, I hope, somebody who's listening who's just like, that is me. That's what I needed to hear, right? And I hope that by doing this sort of research, we're helping expand the imagination of people that, these things are options that we may have not considered before, right? And
yes. Well, especially the way you put it, Matt, because I've never heard of what you're doing, right? Designing an ideal home life for yourself. So I think this is super fascinating. So I do ask you a question about,
Sure.
Have you found any consistencies? Have you started your podcast and started to do research on this? Is there something that, like 80% of us all do at home that makes us like, okay, it's good home life?
Sure, yeah. Well, I've been able to identify a few categories that everybody kind of keeps bringing up. So, for example, the categories like rest, that's like one that a lot of people bring up. A lot of people bring up relationships as a key factor of like both their relationships with people within their home and also social life, hosting people, that kind of thing is an important factor that a lot of people talk about. And I think maybe this last one is something about like more or less like the question, how do you be yourself at home? And how does your home help you be yourself? Right? Which is a very subjective thing that isn't, there's no one answer to that because people are different. Right? But I'd say everybody is kind of playing with those different themes in their homes. And for some, taking care of plants is a big part of that and taking care of a pet. And for others, making sure that they do intermittent fasting is an important part of that. Or others, it's like, oh, actually, I need to host people at least once a week. That's my sweet spot. But what I feel like I'm discovering through this is actually the dials people can turn them up, turn them down, in order to kind of figure out like what is my ideal home, right? How you put it. So I'll have to say, I think I may be a little too early in the research to have gotten at like, hey, here's some more or less universal principles that I recommend anybody do for creating a home life that they love. Right now, maybe more at the point of like, hey, here's some of the dials I've discovered so far, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to discover quite a few more. Yeah, and I'm excited. I'm so excited to keep discovering it all. It's going to be super, super fun. And part of what I'm in this project for is I'm trying to figure this out. We're trying to figure this out as a married couple with a baby who are still adjusting to parenthood a little over a year after having our first kid. And we're always like adjusting with the new needs of a child, right? So
sure.
So I mean, I hope that answers your question, Rob. I thank you for asking it, because it is fun to let people know a little bit about why I'm doing this project, and actually get into a lot more detail about the specific themes that I pick up from like a conversation with you, for example, in some of the write-up work that I do for the newsletter, which I'll talk about at the end of the episode. But
sign up for it. Do it. Do it now.
Hey, thanks, Rob. HomeLifeDesignLab.com. Maybe just give that call to action. But we'll go back to the interview for one sec, because I have a couple more questions for you. So one thing that I'm interested too is people's relationship with their possessions, the things that they have in their home, right? What are some of those prized possessions for you, or whether they're like anything from things in the family or things that you just use on a daily basis or something like that? What are some of your prized home possessions?
I'm going to give you 3.
Cool.
First and foremost, I have, going back to my 90s hip hop, my favorite group of all time. The art that I've spent the most time with is from Outkast. So
cool.
When I was in college, I was working at the college radio station. This guy calls up and he says, hey, if you play me these 3 songs, I'm going to bring you, because I know you're a huge Outkast fan, an autographed Outkast record. So the 3 songs were good songs. I'm like, all right, I'm going to play them. I don't know if this guy's full of it or not. Play the 3 songs. Lo and behold, this guy comes to the radio station and hands me this record. So that, to me, even though I'm not a big autograph guy,
sure,
but I have that in my sitting space, right? Where my creative space, it's the centerpiece of the room, because it's my most favorite thing. My second most favorite thing.
Let me pause you real quick.
Okay.
I want to hear more about this first favorite thing. What does that represent to you? Like this signed Outkast album, like what does that, why do you treasure it? What does it represent to you?
Great question. I think if I think about it, Matt, it's because of what Outkast as a group represents to me. Number one, they call themselves Outkast because they tell you up front they're going to do things differently, right? They're not going to do the same thing that you heard out of New York hip hop or LA hip hop. They were doing their own thing. And as they grew and got more creative and got more creative control, the experimentation and how they approach hip hop was so, I guess, foundational for me to allow myself to think differently, which brings back to even my profession. So when you think of a radio political talk show, you probably think of, like a Rush Limbaugh, who really heavily carried the banner for one side, or maybe someone like Al Franken, who did the left version of that for a few years, the comedian / senator. I've always kind of approached it in a different way as an Outkast. So that record and having an autograph by my 2 favorite creators is just it's a push for me to trust my instincts and create something that's different. And it also reminds me that I have a history of doing that, of approaching like topics in a different way, like political topics. I pride myself in that. So that's why, Matt, that autographed Outkast record is so important to me.
That's such a valuable piece of information about you, Rob. I'm so grateful to learn it. This desire to have an independent voice in an industry that tends to be follow the herd, right? Like one side or another, right? And this signed Outkast record represents to you experimentation. It represents independence. It represents thinking for yourself and going your own way. I love it. That's great. Tell me about some of the other possessions that you have and you love.
Weirdly, the second possession also involves Outkast. So their third album is called Stankonia. So a friend of mine, an incredibly talented artist named Dimitri Hayes, painted that album cover. So it's like sitting above me right now.
No way.
Because again, so I have that, the autograph record in my creative space. And this is the office that I'm in here, which I do some work in here in creative work. So I sit underneath that with that same reminder. And I know that since my friend Dimitri painted it, it's his vision. It's his, I guess I'm looking at it right now. It's his creativity right there. And it's awesome. So that also is inspiring to me to be able to look at that and think bigger and think about like, okay, what is capable? Because I have an interesting relationship with art. I have been fortunate enough to have seen some of the works, the great works, but it wasn't really until I bought this painting from my buddy. And I went to New York in December, and I was at the Met, and I came across this Renoir painting, Impressionist, and I could not stop staring at it. I wanted to sit there, and I wanted to look at it for like hours and look at all the brush strokes. And that was the first time I'd had that experience, even though I've seen the Sistine Chapel. So, because I think what I think about when I think about the Outkast autograph record, Matt, and I think about this painting is, what is possible for a human being to do? Matt, Rob, you, anyone else that is tapping into their creativity, their natural genius, anything is possible, right? And that's what I think about, because it keeps making me push my vision even bigger, even taller, like skyscrapers in San Francisco, for example.
Yeah.
You know, like you want to go higher. You want to make a cool design. You want to stand out. That's what I think about when I sit underneath this painting.
That's amazing. It represents this like creative potential that you have, that we all have. And then it's like a daily reminder, symbolic reminder for you of, I get to be a person who is that creative and is that willing to push boundaries and explore potential, all of that. I love it.
100%. Mm-hmm.
Oh, so good. Okay, you said you had a third object. What is it?
Yes, it's actually this MacBook that I'm talking to you on right now. Always wanted a MacBook because the superior quality, right? But I was like, it's too much money. I don't have enough money. But then I decided to just do it. And I decided to treat myself. And this has become like a major creative tool for me. I don't know why. I just connect with it. And I think, Matt, if I think about it, it's finally saying to myself, I'm worth it to buy the MacBook that I want. Because I had a pretty good couple financial years in the radio business, my first 2 in the history of my life. So I'm like, one thing I'm going to do is invest in myself with this tool, and I'm going to use it. Because I sit down in front of this and I'd want to write everything. I want to write a memoir. I want to write my podcast. It just draws it out of me for some reason. And I think it ties back to that, finally saying to myself, you know what, man? You deserve this. You've worked your butt off for 26 years in this business.
Yeah.
Buy the darn MacBook.
Yeah. And I mean, like, man, that is so huge again. Like this willingness to believe in yourself. That's count yourself worthy, count your creative process, what you're capable of, worthy of investing in, right? Like, and giving yourself the tools to pull it off, right? That's really, really cool. Well, Rob,
I think it's so funny for me, Matt. Just one more thing.
Yeah, please tell me.
I've met a lot of politicians in life, and we always put these kind of politicians on like pedestals. But as I met them, I'm like, they're kind of regular people for the most part.
Yeah.
And I met celebrities along the way in the radio business too, and it's the same thing. And it's not that I'm better, they're better. It's just like, wow, they're capable of this, but so am I. So is Matt. So are you. That's what I think is so amazing about being a human being. We're all capable of amazing things.
Yeah, we all are. Yeah. And, I think, Rob, you have just given me, even as I'm interviewing you, a lot of inspiration for what it looks like to embrace your creative potential, surround yourself with an environment that inspires you and helps you really get into places of freedom and ideation and creativity and all of that good stuff. So thank you so much, Rob, for participating in this research with me and being a heck of a hang. So it was super fun to talk with you. As we're wrapping up, so what are some of the things that people are working on, that people can learn more about, that you're working on, and how could they get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Thank you, Matt. I really appreciate the time with you. This has been a lot of fun. And One way, so I have a communication course that is designed to help you in two different ways, because communication works internally, right? That internal voice, the one that used to say to me, "You're not worthy. You can't buy that MacBook," and how you can turn that around. Because if that voice is your guiding voice, how do you find a way to change it? So I work on that in the program, and then your emotions too always impact what you say. And then the second part really is how you communicate person to person, or in front of a group, or how do you run an effective meeting? So there's all kinds of tools in there. So if anybody's interested in that, best way to do that is go to onthepaintedporch.com/communication. Onthepaintedporch.com/communication. So right now we have, if you want it, it's a sale. You can reach out to me. My email address, I'll just give it to you, robhunter1@gmail.com.
Nice.
Light it up. Let's go.
All right. I love it.
I didn't mean to do the plug there, but I do believe at my core, Matt, that communication is so essential to us as human beings. It's like the one major skill we all use every day in so many different ways.
Without a doubt. And I encourage anybody who's interested to go, please check that out. And I'm going to just go ahead and put those links on a page so that you can all easily find them. And it'll be in the show notes for this episode. Again, Rob, thank you so much. And as we're closing up, for anybody who's listening, please take a look at homelifedesignlab.com, because what I'm doing there is I'm taking these sorts of interviews, and I'm a researcher. So what I do is I splice up these interviews, I tag them, I look for themes in this interview and also across all the other interviews that I'm doing, in order to find insights that are helpful for helping people design a home life that they love. That's what's going to happen on homelifedesignlab.com. So you can go there, you can subscribe to that newsletter. You also have an option to become a premium subscriber, which will get you more insights, more content. And you can also become a premium subscriber on this podcast, which will also get you some more premium content that me and my wife are doing, where we take some of the insights we're learning along the way and figuring out how do we apply this for our lives. So we'll bring you right along for the journey. We hope you enjoy listening to this. And thank you again, Rob, for being a part of it. And everybody take care, and we'll see you next time.